Hello, my name is Matthew Bushwacka. Welcome to my studio. I've been here for about 10 years now. I've been making music for about 16, 17 years. Lots of different music over the years. I've run a breakbeat label called Plank Records for a long time, which was specialising in experimental breaks music. A tech house label called Oblong. I work with Layo under the name of Layo and Bushwacka. We've been recording together for 10 years now. Put out a lot of music, and we now have our own label called Meto, which is kicking at the moment. There's a track that we've recently finished, which I'm going to take you through, which is called After the Love. It was actually a vocal track about 17 or 18 years ago by a well-known artist, and a few years ago I asked the label if I could have the parts to do a remix. I never got around to it, and we finally got around to doing something with it. We've done our own version of it, and that's what we're going to take you through now. Okay, so basically when we started putting this track together, I took all the vocals from the original DAT, put them into Pro Tools, tidied them up a little bit, and then put them to one side. Then we started getting some loops together. With Reactor, made a really simple loop, which was a very straightforward bass loop, but obviously in our heads was going to sound great on the dance floor for everybody. And we took a few different versions of it. Took a light version, medium version of it, and a heavy version of it, for lots of changes of dynamics throughout the track. Played with it a little bit, filtered it, put it all together as a basis. Now, we actually ended up having to replace this loop because although it sounded fantastic in the studio through the speakers, very rarely, because usually if it sounds good in here it sounds good out, very rarely it sounded really strange on the dance floor. So we tried again and again, and I think there was some really strange phasing going on within the loop, and ended up replacing it, just copying the line, and now it works a treat. What I generally tend to do with Reactor, because it's quite processor heavy, is make what I want out of it, sample it into the audio, and then move on, either take the plugin away or get a few more things out of it and move on. I don't tend to run it live too much, although the effects in it are really good. Okay, so this is the Reactor plugin that we use to get our original bass loop out of. It's a really crazy plugin called New School, which is, as you rightly say, probably where half of the minimal ideas came from. Not quite sure exactly how it's working or what it's doing, but it's certainly a lot of fun to use. You can control all the different parameters down here. Which is where we got the different frequencies from. Etc. Okay, so to replace the bass line, I used a synth by a guy called Rob Rapin called Blue, which is this. I've got a couple of different waves, a triangle wave, a square wave, put them together, copied the sound, added a filter to it, put it through the compressor, and it's almost the same as what we had before, but we've got our own kick added on now. So, job done really. I wasn't keen to do that at the beginning because I was convinced that this other one was like such a fantastic sound, but this one was just, it's very simple, it works just as well. Right from the start of the track, from the off, there's a big intro, the bass is filtered out using the automation in Ableton until a little bit later in the track, just to give it a bit of dynamic, a bit of reverb, a bit of atmosphere, and also we're using a softer kick to start with, so that a bit later on it can come back with different levels of dynamics, different levels of strength of kick to lift the whole track up a little bit in places. It's quite a long intro, but it really works on the dance floor. It's got a little bit of magic to it because it's like one of those things that's slowly building, subtly building. Okay, well the kick's just a straight up 808 kick with a little bit of EQ on top. It's a sample kick, so it's got a really short release on it anyway. Due to the fact that the bass line that we originally sampled seemed to be creating a lot of problems because of the low frequency long release within that, we keep this short and it gives the track more space in between to differentiate the sounds. Like, long kicks can be really nice, they're better at a slower tempo though for a lot of things, otherwise they can take up too much space in the mix. Yeah, the other kick is actually a very similar kick, but we've got a filter underneath it to take out some of the bass, and it's a little bit shorter too. We add some reverb to it at the beginning of the track just to give it a bit of atmosphere, but we keep all the low end of the kick until the vocals kick in. On top of the bass line that we've already written to give the track a bit of weight to make up for what we've lost, we've added a couple of notes of sub bass from the Alice's Andromeda, which is a fantastic machine, if not a little fiddly to use, but it's great for real analog sound. It's actually triggered via MIDI from the Andromeda, so we're running MIDI as well. It still happens in this day and age. We also have this sample playing underneath quite a lot of the track, which is just a very strange, simple percussion sound, kind of a little underwater sound, nice and subliminal in the mix. Going through all sorts of things down at this end. We're going through an auto filter, then we're going through a resonator, through an auto pan, and ending up going through another resonator to give it that sound. The main reverb that we're using in this track is actually one of Ableton's own straightforward reverb tracks, just with a big 51 millisecond pre-delay on it, 12.5 second decay time, and a little bit of filtering on it to give it a lot of space. Let's get to the vocals. You may recognise the singer, you may not. It's actually an old track from about 17, 18 years ago. It was quite an underground track back then on the house scene. He's got a very powerful voice. I had some really good help with the EQing of the voice and how to get the vocal sound that we've got from my mentor, engineer producer of the highest calibre, Intragonin, who's taught me pretty much most of what I know. Hopefully I can teach him something back these days. So, vocals dry. Really first of all, going through the liquid mix.
You could give him everything.
Using vintage US tube compression.
Enough.
Just enough to keep it nice and squashed.
Mother's crying all alone.
After that, it's going through
what did I do wrong?
A multi-processor within Ableton called vocal doubling processor, which is basically going through a bit of EQ, a really short delay, and a little piece of chorus, and then a little bit of the very low end taken out with an auto filter. Okay, so here's the trick that I've been shown to give the vocal the sound that it's got. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm sending a feed of the dry vocal through into a return channel where it's going through a compressor again, but really compressed a lot, squashed as much as you can get it. Then after that, it's going through an EQ, with lots and lots of EQ, as much as possible, around the 5K range. That signal is then being fed back into the original signal, which actually brings a real presence to the vocal throughout the track. It's a trick that Ian taught me that hopefully I'll be able to use again, because it's really worked a lot of magic. On top of that, the vocal is also being fed into a Waves Morphoda plugin to give it a little bit of harmonics at a low level. That's being mixed back into the original signal too, so there's all in all a lot of processing going on the voice.
Raising up a family.
So you can hear the vocoder underneath.
You got to be so strong.
If I turn up,
if
I turn up the extra EQ'd voice underneath, you'll hear what that's doing as well.
You could give them everything. It wouldn't be enough.
The chorus, the vocals, very similar effects on the voice to what we did with the verses, but on top of that we're also sending it through to a filter delay as well. It's very high frequencies are all there, the low frequencies are all taken out, and the delay is set on triplets.
After the love that's gone, how can we carry on?
A bit of panning and the middle taken
After
out.
the love that's gone, how can we carry on? After the love that's gone, how can we carry on? carry on after the love is gone? How can we carry on?
That's it, yeah. Okay, so for the piano, this is really old school flavour piano stab that we've got going on here. I actually can't remember if we sampled it or played it, but I know that we've played it since sampling it, if that's what we did do. Going through an effect called the crystal reverb, which is basically some pitch delays with lots of feedback on them to give it a little tinkly magic. Also going through the liquid mix with a little bit of Focusrite compression and a little bit of extra mid-range EQ. To add to the piano, we've created some harmonics to go underneath them, which we did by putting the piano through a really nice resonating effect, replaying it over the top, and then recording into audio about 50 of them, choosing a few of the harmonics that worked for us and adding it underneath. So the harmonics, very FM sounding. You couldn't hear that just in the track on its own, but that does help to add to the magic of the piano. I rewrote the line, put it through a sound which I edited. I can't remember which synth. It sounds like Blue to me. It's quite random, and I just recorded loads of them into audio, chose the ones that I thought worked well with it. Okay, so these are all the harmonics that we recorded in. We only chose a couple to use underneath the piano, but it was quite random, so we had a whole heap. Very resonant. You can hear it under the track. Almost another mix in itself. Okay, back to MIDI again. The hi-hats on this track are actually coming off this Korg Electro ER1, which belongs to my partner Layo. It's great for really tight, very electronic-y, bitty sounds, and quite good for editing in the mix, as you'll see a little bit later. Okay, to add a bit of dynamics, changing from one section to another, rather than just crashing a cymbal, we've actually got 3 live instruments going on. We've got a shaker, we've got a rain stick, and we've got a tambourine. They're going through some delays, they're going through some reverbs, they're going through some automation on the volume, they're panned, and they're all mixed together. And the result of that is...
Every day just like the last, poverty and love.
Part of the percussion within the track is coming from the Korg Electro, as I said. When I actually recorded the track into the computer, I was opening up the decay live on it to give it an effect like this. The drum machine is going through a big reverb from the Eventide Eclipse as well. So that's obviously the piano, and then the piano reversed. But this point we're getting into the sort of middle section of the track where it gets a bit more dirty on the dance floor, the vocals are put away to the side for a little bit and gets a bit more action packed for a couple of minutes. Breaks down to a kind of almost cheesy, nasty chord sound, which is kind of very light. It takes away the elements of a heavier sound from the piano that was coming in earlier, which makes more space later on to come back with a more powerful sound, as I'll demonstrate to you through this part of the track. Okay, so there's a few interesting things going on here. One was this sample, which was again taken from Reactor, although which plugin escapes me at the moment, but we did have a lot of fun with this because it's really horrible. Now, as you can see, that's going through an auto filter, which is set peaking, and that is being edited and automated while that sound's playing. So it's kind of like a high pass, but with a little bit of extra resonance on top. These chords, again, came from a Reactor plugin. Also going through a little bit of the auto filter and a bit of EQ. Okay, all these sounds here I played myself using the Hansonic HBD 15, which is one of my favourite instruments. It's so much fun. I've got so much mileage out of that because I've been playing the drums for many years before I started. So what I will have done is I will have recorded this in live, then I will have put it into Ableton and processed it. Again, it's going through an auto filter. It's also going through a tube effect to give it a little bit more warmth. But what else is going on with this sound is that using Ableton, I'm actually pitching the sound up while it's playing so that it's slowly rising up, which you can do with Ableton's fantastic time stretching facilities, and that just makes the track feel like it's accelerating, it's going somewhere, it's building up to a bit more of a climax. So you can see here the transposition. Okay, then we've got the snares again played here, edited and kicked around a tiny little bit within Ableton because we've got the option of the warp marking in Ableton, which is, you know, a fantastic tool, which means you can basically choose where exactly you want your transients to start within a loop. So if you've got a baggy loop, you can tighten it up really easily. If you've got a tight loop, you want to put a bit of groove on it, you can do that really easily too. And you know, one of the great things about Ableton is the ability to be able to put a swing onto straight groove straight away and to speed up and slow down the audio. These snares are nice and powerful, a bit military, and just going again through the liquid mix with a little bit of high frequency to give it a little bit of air, shall we say, really high up in the 20k range, and a little bit of a boost at 8k as well and at 700k, just to make it really fat, with a bit of compression too. Okay, this sound here, for some reason, in my twisted head, is actually one of my favourite sounds. It really reminds me of a kind of Richie Hawtin, funky, kind of minimal techno, kind of percussive sound I'd expect to hear on one of his records or something on his label. I actually messed around with this sound for ages, but very subtly, didn't really get too far with it. The original sound is just a very, very straight click rim shot. Then it's going through an awful lot of things. It's going through a bit reducer, it's going through a gate, it's going through some resonating echoes, it's going through a delay and through a flanger, and finally again through the liquid mix, which has been used extensively on this piece, going through an emulation of the original SSL main channel compressor and an emulation of a bit of SSL EQ as well. All of those things ended up not doing too much to the sound, but I'm sure it's done something. So we're on to the final part of the track, or the final third of the track, which is the last verse, with not too much else going on underneath, but the watery sound that I explained earlier, just underneath, to give it a little bit more of a different feel.
Tangled by religion, those that still believe, when you don't have nothing, the Lord you will believe. Television lifestyle, people come on down. Welcome to the future, your feet won't touch the ground.
Okay, the last section of the track after the breakdown with the chorus is just the piano, the bass, a few of the percussion sounds, big long lead out, lots of vibe, lots of atmosphere. This track's actually 9 minutes long, which is fairly long for a dance track these days. Because of the long intro, we may do a radio edit as well. Let's see. Now the original track was recorded when we made it. We did it at 120 BPM. I time stretched the vocals in Pro Tools within pitch and time. 120 BPM felt kind of slow on the dance floor with the track, so we tried time stretching the whole track afterwards, but it didn't sound quite as good, so I came back in and redid it. One of the great things with Ableton is the fact that you can just speed up and slow down the track. And you've instantly got a down tempo mix going on if you want it. Sound quality is pretty good considering what it's doing to the actual audio. It's very intuitive because it changes all the effects, delay speeds, the reverb tails, everything that needs to be changed. Also, something that I use a lot generally on tracks that we produce in here is the SPL Vitalizer, which is a stereo enhancer and audio exciter. So what it basically does is it widens the stereo spread of a track. You can also bring up a little bit of brightness in it, and you can process the mids and the bottom end to either tighten or deepen the bass, and I usually use that either across the whole track or across like the main parts of the track if there are a few things that I don't want to go through it. And these days what I tend to do is, once we've got everything up and running, is I send all the tracks that are going into the mixing desk to buses 1 and 2, and then record it back into the computer again as audio. Obviously we used to record to DAT and then to CD, which I still liked doing, actually, recording to CD, because I liked the fact that the sound was coming out of the digital domain into the analog domain, so I can actually tweak the sounds through the desk and add a little bit more of a hot signal if I need to, go through into CD. Unfortunately, the play button has managed to insert itself inside the CD player, so that's now defunct for the moment. So that's kind of how we record our tracks in afterwards, and then we name it. If it's for DJing, we'll then take it into Pro Tools. Like I already recorded the final version of this track onto this channel here. So that's basically everything that we've gone through, that's the whole track now. And I then take it into Pro Tools and maximise it a little bit for a nice hot signal to burn on CD for DJing. But when it comes to mastering, it's always best to give the mastering people just the original track and let them do their work on it, because otherwise if you give them something that's compressed already, they can't do a good job on it. So that's it with this track basically. We're just about to release our Global Underground mix CD. We've done compilation albums before. We've done them various different ways. Got asked to do Global Underground, which we're really excited about. Coming out as Global Underground Rio, which is one of our favourite places in the world. It's a double CD. The first CD is a lot of music from 20 years ago, around that era when we first started getting into acid house and DJing, and the second CD is a lot more modern stuff. Instead of mixing the way we've done it before, which has been straight off the turntables and mix are recorded in, done it with Ableton, which has been a lot of fun actually. It's a totally different way of working, but it's, I think some people, like purists, can regard it as cheating, but when you've already proven over many years your mixing skills and abilities, I think it's good to use the technology that's available to you now to be able to do something new with it. And so what we did was, I got my assistant Tam to come in and record all the old records for CD1 into Pro Tools, normalise them, chop and tail them, and then save them as WAV files, which I then loaded up into Ableton. We started off with a whole lot of tracks. We've got about 50 or 60 tracks, and then we went through a process of elimination, which was a combination of what we felt worked, mixing in with each other, and also what we could get licensing permission for, because a lot of these old tracks were really hard to track down, so it was a little bit of a nightmare. The way that Ableton works with tracks is it sets warp markers at certain positions, and it's pretty good normally at working out itself where they should go. So it codes the WAV file or the audio file. It puts its own code on it, which allows you to speed it up or slow it down, and to change start and end points within the track itself. So regarding mixing tracks together on the computer, it can actually be quite complicated to try and keep everything quite tight, which is what's been great about Ableton, because you can get to a certain point within a track and you can see from the position of the warp marker that it thinks it's slightly gone out, so you can then move that along a little bit and you can adjust it, which is fantastic. Which is kind of like what I've done here. You know, at bar 65, I've had to actually adjust it, move it along a little bit. Because you can change the BPM manually or automatically within Ableton, we've actually got automation on the tempo of the whole mix, which doesn't vary too much, but we start off at the beginning at like 122 BPM. Once we've got into about 15-20 minutes in, we're up to about 126, 128 maximum, fluctuates down a little bit again, up a little bit again, just to make things work, make things fit in, which is really cool. Quite complicated way of mixing something together, when normally you're going to do this live as a DJ, and you might have many different ways of mixing and many different techniques that you use when you're DJing, but you know, it's very live. With this, you know, it's very much about volume levels, about how long your fade outs are going to be, about also looping up certain sections of tracks to mix other tracks into, which was quite fun, because there were certain sections of tracks that we weren't so keen on. We could bypass those. We could get to a section towards the end of a track, loop up the bit we liked, mix something else into it, add a few delays here and there, a little bit of effects, a few acapellas over the top. Only used like 4 or 5 audio tracks to do this, just like a few of them with various different EQs for certain tracks on them. And the whole thing's like 75 minutes long, and I think on CD1 there's 23 tracks, which is a lot on CD1, maybe a bit more in fact, and slightly less on CD2, which was much easier to do because all the tracks on CD2 came in off CD as WAVs already digitally, whereas a lot of these records were very old, they'd been played a million times and the production wasn't as good. So when I took this to the mastering suite, I asked them to get rid of any really big crackles. Apart from that, try not to change it too much. So it does sound kind of old school for this mix, but you know, it's been a fantastic process. And I know some DJs, Sasha for example, uses Ableton to DJ with these days. I mean, I use Serato now and I still play records and CDs. I haven't got into using Ableton to actually DJ with. I'm sure it's good fun, but a lot of hard work and a lot of programming. So I don't think it's cheating at all. I think it's a really good way of experimenting. You can swap tracks around very easily if something works, if something doesn't work. You know, it's been a pleasure doing it. It's been really good fun. So thumbs up to the Ableton guys. Before Ableton, I was using Logic. I've used Logic for a long time. It's a fantastic program. It's amazing, really comprehensive. And I remember years ago it was Cubase, and it was Notator or Creator, and then Logic as well. And a lot of people stuck with Cubase for the reason that they could get hold of a cracked copy of it a lot easier, a working copy, than with Logic Audio. You know, so people like they were brought up on that, and they stuck with that. So it was quite a big changeover to go from one to the other, especially working because I used to work at Mr. C's studio when he was doing the Shaman assisting and engineering, and you know, I'd go in there and work, and a lot of people were just used to Cubase, so it made them feel a little bit kind of disabled. But then I think Logic kind of took over as the main program quite a while ago. I don't know what the score is with Cubase these days, but I went back to Logic the other day, and it's a fantastic program. I really, really love it. I just it's horses for courses. As I said, Ableton is fun. It's got a very different way of working. I'm not so keen on the MIDI editing in Ableton. It's a lot more comprehensive in Logic, but I love the way that Ableton manipulates audio and the way that you can actually manipulate it in a lot of different ways. Fantastic automation. Logic obviously has fantastic automation too. So I've gone back to Logic recently to do a remix for somebody, and it doesn't take that long to get used to it again. It's just a few key commands, where is everything. Also use Pro Tools, but I don't use that really for programming. I use that just for audio processes. If I need to bring in some audio and tidy it up and do things to it, either before making a track or after something's finished and I want to do a bit of tidying up on it. But we use the 192 HD interface all the time, so the sound quality is really high. The setup that I've got here in the studio obviously incorporates a lot of external equipment. To be honest, a lot of tracks that I've written recently, I've hardly used that much external stuff at all. I've often just had a stereo channel into the mixing desk and then recorded back out again. Perhaps a little bit of extra effects, and there's so much amazing soft synth plugins and sounds and sample libraries available now within just within the computer. I remember 11-12 years ago I was engineering an album for a friend of mine, and he was saying, oh yeah, in 10 years time you'll be able to do everything on your computer, and I'm like, really? You know, and now I have my laptop here and I have Ableton on there, and I have all the Native Instruments plugins, and I have all the Arturia plugins, and it's enough for me to be able to write a track on the road if I want to. What I find, however, though, the sound quality on these plugins these days is really amazing. I mean, like with the Native Instruments stuff, Reactors is an incredible program, and I think it's influenced the style of music for a lot of people, a lot of genres in certain ways. I mean, when I've got new versions of Reactor, new upgrades, and I've heard certain synthesizers within it, I thought, oh, that's where these guys are getting that kind of sound from, you know, and that goes with a few other things as well. It goes with the way that you write music in Ableton. It goes with the certain tricks that you can do in Logic. It's very much dependent with this whole soft synth situation on the power of your computer as to how much you can get out of it. I mean, I've got, you know, a fairly powerful computer in here. That was bought a couple of years ago. I mean, computers date very quickly with regarding amount of RAM and speed of the computer. So this is really powerful, but then the software gets upgraded, gets updated, needs more memory, needs more processing power. I can get a fair amount out of this, but some of the soft synths use up quite a lot of power, and so I still get quite a lot of mileage out of my external equipment. I mean, for example, the Hansonic is a complete interface and a tool in itself. Apart from the fact that the sounds are fantastic in it as well, it's just such a nice way to actually put your percussion in, and not even necessarily just use it on percussion, but it's really hands-on, it's really live, it's better than just tapping away at a keyboard for a lot of purposes. And quite often I'll record some percussion in off the hand sonic, and I'll record the MIDI unquantized, and I'll also record it as audio, and then I'll quantize the MIDI a little bit and see how close to what I've played it comes up as, and if it doesn't sound right, I can reduce the quantization, or I can just use the audio, which I often do as well. So that's, you know, one external MIDI piece of equipment that I'll always use. The other one, the Roland drum pads, which is put away over here, the SBD20, used to be called an Octopad. I think it still is. Very, very tough box, very simple, but the audio quality is like very, very fat and very powerful, and the drum samples that are in it are fantastic. I mean, I haven't used it for quite a long time, but I wrote a lot of tracks with drum sounds from that, and if sometimes I would sample them in, other times I'd just play it live off of that box. It's only got 2 outputs on it, but you know, that's another piece that I'd never turn my back on. Regarding the keyboards, obviously you need to have a big keyboard to be able to play in, whether you're playing off a soft synth or whether you're playing off the keyboard itself. This, the Novation Supernova 2, which I bought a long time ago, I've actually got more mileage out of that keyboard than any other keyboard that is either in here or has passed through here. The sounds are really, really good that come out of that machine. I've used many sounds on many tracks, and it's got a real warmth to it, a real vibe with strings, good basses, like really nice resonance, and it's totally hands-on as well regarding tweaking the sounds, which is always really nice. The Nord lead, it's a very nice sounding synth. Haven't got quite as much mileage out of that, but it has been good for certain purposes. There have been like a few particular sounds on certain tracks that have come from that. We actually bought that in the States when we were recording our last album over there, and we lived over there, and used that as an addition to the studio, because the studio we recorded in there was quite different to this in the way that it had lots of old guitars lying around, lots of old amps, microphones, that kind of stuff. Just a Pro Tools setup, but no external like electronic stuff at all, really. So it was a very different way of working for us. We did a lot of sampling in, a lot of recording of live musicians, and then took it back here and mixed it together. The Alesis Andromeda is an amazing sounding beast of a synth. I haven't really seen them that often in many places. It's not the easiest synth in the world to program. It's got a really fat sound, and it really sounds very analog in the digital domain that we're in these days. Although, you know, it is analog, it's digitally controlled, but it is analog. I used to have a problem with it with a mains harmonic for a long time, which I never got dealt with, but now it's totally dealt with. I'm starting to use it again. The only thing that would be really nice is if every different knob and fader were actually recordable to automate it, which is why soft synths are actually so fantastic as well, because obviously with all the old original analog synths and stuff, you couldn't, you could MIDI them up, but basically you couldn't record all the changes or the tweaks you're making unless you record it all in live. Whereas with the analog, with the digital soft synths in here, like for example at the ARP 2600, I used to use one of those when I was working at the Shaman studio, and it's like scientific. It's like you need a degree in maths and science to actually really kind of work out what's going on. An awful lot of fun, and recorded into audio and sampled some fantastic sounds out of it. This emulation of it is equally as confusing, but absolutely fantastic. They've really sussed it out with all this stuff, and according to a friend of mine who's also got the same set of soft synths, a lot of them sound really similar to the original synths. They've got whatever the logarithm is that they're using, they've really hit the nail on the head. So you can automate these synths that you could never automate before. You can save your sounds instantly. It's fantastic. Regarding the actual old school analog versus new school digital. There's always going to be that purist attitude and element of, you know, the analog thing sounding better, and you know, I can understand it. But now with powerful computers, with powerful processors, and these new versions of the software, it's getting closer and closer to the real thing. I mean, I've got the acoustic piano synth and module, and the electric piano module, and they take up huge amounts of memory. There's millions of samples in there, but they sound amazing. And it's been a massive challenge in the industry that we're in to recreate a piano which actually sounds like a piano. I mean, they're still struggling with the guitar doing that because of the amount of expression that you have with that instrument, but they're getting there. I mean, I have a soft synth called BFD, which is a drum emulation, and you know, you choose from real kits, original kits, and then you tune them yourself, and they're made up of like hundreds of thousands of little samples with different nuances and different feels. So you can really, like, there's been an obsession for such a long time with recreating a live instrument sound with a computer. They're really getting there as well. But you know, on the other side of the coin, I really like proper electronic sounds that sound like completely unreal and unlive. Some advice for people that want to get into producing, maybe that are just starting out or about to go and buy some equipment and really keen to crack on with everything. I get asked a lot of the time by people, either via email or phone call, or when I'm out DJing, like I could suggest to them various pieces of equipment that I think that they should use, or they've been given a budget to go and get some stuff. I think the main advice that I could give is, first of all, always go with your heart regarding the music that you're making. If you've got a lot of ideas and a lot of original ideas and experiments in your head that you want to try out and do, keep on doing it, and don't lose sight of that. Don't try to sound like somebody else. Be influenced by people that you look up to, but don't try to sound just like them. Unless you're doing this with a different angle, don't think that you're going to make loads of money from making music, because it generally doesn't work like that. Unless you're like a producer or writer of a lot of pop songs and stuff, you just go with what you're doing, and eventually the good things will come to you. Regarding equipment and stuff, I mean, you really can do an awful lot with a laptop. I'd recommend for people starting out, if you're new to making music and you're about to invest in a sequencer and you're not sure which one to go for, it really depends what your end result what end result you want to have. Logic is fantastic. It's quite expensive. It is a fantastic program. It's very deep. There's a lot of depth to it. I won't say it's overcomplicated, but I'd say that there's an awful lot to take in with Logic for a newcomer. Although the manual that comes with Logic is very well written, it doesn't take too long to get to know your way around it. Ableton can be a lot more instant, I guess a lot more fun, and you know, I say it is a simpler program than Logic. It's got its pluses and its minuses. It's not so good, I don't think, for MIDI sequencing. It's very good for throwing in loops, sounds, getting a lot of things working together quite quickly, and also very good for doing live performances. It's actually designed for that as well, like massively. You know, a lot of people use Ableton to do their performances live, but they write in Logic. A lot of producers that I know write their music in Logic, Pro Tools, and then record all the parts into Ableton to do a live show with. You need to get yourself a good MIDI keyboard controller as well, if you haven't already got one. Something that's got, if you've got the space for it, a bigger keyboard than this, something that's got knobs and faders for controlling your automation and for controlling your synths. Speakers and stuff like that, I mean, you can have the best speakers in the world. If the room's wrong, the sound's going to be wrong. You know, it's very important when you make a track to listen to it on loads of different systems. Listen to it in a car stereo, listen to it on a little tinny stereo you might have in the kitchen, listen to it on your hi-fi, listen to it in a club if you get the opportunity, and you know, go back and notice the differences in the sound and see what sticks out, or what isn't loud enough, or what's got too much EQ on it, whatever. And I used to do this a lot before I built this place, and I still do it now. And I always listen to things quietly on a set of headphones, on a good set of headphones as well, before finishing your mix, because you'll notice other things too. If you're doing long studio sessions, don't monitor loudly all day, because otherwise your high frequencies will get tired. If you're confused about PC or Mac, my preference is Mac. It's always been Mac. I mean, PCs are cheaper, they're, you know, a lot more readily available, a lot of choice, a lot more easy to get hold of, but a lot more things can go wrong and do go wrong. No matter what happens, like, Macs are very, very user friendly and not prone to viruses either. I mean, computers crash, doesn't matter what they are, but definitely, I know it's a bit more money, but it's kind of geared up for the creative industries, which is the music and video and photos. So Mac all the way. Over the years, we've accumulated a very big sample library, and a lot of those have come from the sample CDs that you can buy, like, for example, Time and Space do, like, pretty much all of them. I've never had an issue with using those at all in any way, because in my head it's never about, like, where the sound's from. It's about, does it work? Does it fit into the context of what I'm doing? Does it sound good? Can I do something different with it? You know, it's like presets. If like you're using presets on a synthesizer, they're good already. If it sounds great, then leave it as it is. You don't have to change it. It's really good to experiment and mess around with sounds, so you can understand how the synth works, and you can understand why certain things change certain elements of a sound. But the main thing is, if it works, then go for it. Of course, if you've heard it somewhere else, then, you know, maybe not. But the main thing is, if it works, use it. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know, always back everything up. Always back your hard drive up quite regularly. I've lost volumes of work from hard drives dying on me, and it's so important to do that all the time. Yeah, once you've finished making some tracks and you're wondering what to do next, these days things have changed so much that if you want to get people to hear your music, you can put it up on your MySpace site or your whatever site you're using on the internet. You can send people tracks via You Send It in full versions. You can contact record labels that you think might possibly be into what you've made, depending on what kind of sound that they have. You can send them tracks directly. Don't be put off if you don't hear anything back 99% of the time, because when I used to run my labels here, we got sent CDs all the time, and it's really hard to be able to listen to everything, and also find things that really ring people's bells. So, you know, for a lot of these people, some of them, they won't give it the time of day, other people will give it their full attention, but eventually something will happen as well. So I think the best way to get the music across is using the internet these days. Build up a little profile of yourself, a little CV to say who you are, what your interests are, what you like, what you've done so far, and take it from there. You know, it's also really good to offer your services in a commercial studio. Like, you won't get paid for it, but you can learn an awful lot. And I started off making music on my own in my bedroom and developing that, but then I worked as an assistant for 3 years in a big studio, basically for my train fares and a bit of lunch. And sometimes I was in there 80 hours a week, and sometimes I was just reading manuals, wiring plugs, and other times I was engineering, but I learned an awful lot. So it's always good to look at what other people are doing and try and learn from that as well. Okay, so basically that's it. I've just taken you through the workings of a track, kind of showing you what I do without going into too much detail. I hope you gained something from it, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.